Many have been talking about a third temple being made in Israel, along with temple sacrifices being brought back. So, will this be a good thing? Let's talk about it. Hey, this is Off the Cuff, and I'm Steve from TorahFamily.org. To start this short teaching off, one needs to realize that Yeshua, Jesus, did not do away with sacrifices. I know many try to say Yeshua's death on Passover was the perfect and last sin sacrifice of all. What they don't realize is that Passover is not a sin sacrifice. No, I'm not going to reteach other teachings I've done on this topic. So, if you want to know more about that, you can see these teachings: His sacrifice, the eternal covenant, and was the law nailed to the cross. These go into detail on how Yeshua's death paid for our sins, but did nothing to the sacrificial system. In fact, you can visit our Faith Foundations page that covers multiple topics in showing why the Torah is still for believers today. Yeshua specifically said he did not come to abolish the law, and that nothing would disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. We have two witnesses that shows the whole Torah will be the law of the land again. Isaiah chapter 2, verses 3 and 4, along with Micah chapter 4, verses 2 and 3. The second verse of each implies this will be during the millennium. That means the sacrificial system will be in place again at that time. But here's the thing. This doesn't happen until Yeshua is reigning as king, when he sets up the priesthood. However, there is coming a time when the sacrificial system will be set back up by those who Yahweh says are rejecting his ways. This time is referenced in Isaiah 66. Isaiah 66 is a chapter that pretty much starts off from the opening of the end times. It discusses the resurrection and even the second Exodus at the end of it all. It starts off with the topic of building the temple, found here in verses 1 and 2. We see the topic of building the house of Yahweh, and then verse 2 closes with, "This is the one I esteem, he who is humble and contrite in spirit, and trembles at my word." So he esteems those who trembles at his word, not at the teachings of men, no, at his word. Verse 3 then discusses a people opposite of those who trembles at his word. It says, "But whoever sacrifices a bull is like one who kills a man, and whoever offers a lamb, like one who breaks a dog's neck. Whoever makes a grain offering is like one who presents pig's blood, and whoever burns memorial incense, like one who worships an idol. They have chosen their own ways, and their souls delight in their abominations." So, first Isaiah discusses a people wanting to make a house for Yahweh in verse 1, but then differentiates them from those who have a humble and contrite heart. Then, verse 3 discusses that first group as those who make sacrifices are an abomination in the eyes of Yahweh. Now, please note, sacrifices done biblically are not an abomination. So, what's the difference with those doing the sacrifices here in verse 3? The difference is given in the last sentence of the verse. It says, "They have chosen their own ways, and their souls delight in their abominations." They've chosen their own ways. Remember, mixing your ways with the ways of God still makes those ways your ways and not His. The only time you're following His ways are when you're following His ways and His ways only. He then continues about those who make these sacrifices in verse 4. Verse 4 says, So I also will choose harsh treatment for them and will bring upon them what they dread. For when I called, no one answered. When I spoke, no one listened. They did evil in my sight and chose what displeases me. It says they chose what displeases Yahweh. They chose the ways and teachings of man over the Torah. Though the Torah says there is one Torah for all, many of them get extremely mad if they see Gentiles pursuing the Torah. I've seen this firsthand when visiting Israel. In fact, the next verse discusses this specifically. Verse 5. Hear the word of Yahweh, you who tremble at his word. Your brothers who hate you and exclude you because of my name have said, let Yahweh be glorified, that we may see your joy. Yet they will be put to shame. So, the prodigal son is returning to the ways of Yahweh. But the older brother, Judah, is mad and making it known. We see their dissension, hatred even, against those who tremble at the word of Yahweh and not the teachings of the Jews passed down. It says they exclude us, and that's why they created the Noahide laws for the Gentiles. They say the Torah is only for the Jews. And notice how it says because of his name. Ironically, most Jews today refuse to say the name of Yahweh. And, as I've noted in our teaching, beware of the Noahide laws. This hatred will turn into persecution against anyone who pursues the Torah and holds to the faith in Yeshua. Notice also how those who make the sacrifices say, let Yahweh be glorified, that we may see your joy. This will be them rejoicing at the sacrifices they restart. Yet Isaiah immediately says they will be put to shame. A time of judgment that will come not long after they begin the sacrifices. In fact, that's what we see in the next verse. Verse 6. Hear that uproar in the city. Hear that noise from the temple. It is the sound of Yahweh repaying his enemies all they deserve. Now, some would say, but Steve, these are believers. How can they be considered enemies of Yahweh? Anyone who chooses to follow their own way and rebel against the ways of Yahweh is the enemy of Yahweh. Just ask Korah and his followers from Numbers chapter 16. And please don't forget, these were all Levites and Reubenites, all from the original 12 tribes. This coming judgment will be the time they're eventually overrun, after Jerusalem is surrounded. The time of judgment Yeshua declared was coming. Yet, even after this judgment subsides, they'll continue in their ways. And yet, the following verses show who Yahweh declares to be his nation, those who partake in the first resurrection. Verse 7. Before she goes into labor, she gives birth. Before the pains come upon her, she delivers a son. Who has ever heard of such a thing? Who has ever seen such things? Can a country be born in a day, or a nation be brought forth in a moment? Yet, no sooner is Zion in labor than she gives birth to her children. These are true Israel. Thus the words of Romans 8:19. The creation waits in eager expectation for the sons of God to be revealed. These are the true nation of Israel, those who pursue the ways of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, as written down by Moses and fully explained and taught by Yeshua himself. After Yeshua takes those of the first resurrection, the time will come at the Battle of Armageddon when Yeshua brings the final judgment, as noted in verse 15. It reads, See, Yahweh is coming with fire, and his chariots are like a whirlwind. He will bring down his anger with fury, and his rebuke with flames of fire. For with fire and with his sword Yahweh will execute judgment upon all men, and many will be those slain by Yahweh. It's after this when we see the survivors of the tribulation start on their way to Jerusalem for the second Exodus, as noted at verse 19. It reads, "I will set a sign among them, and I will send some of those who survive to the nations, to Tarshish, to the Libyans and Lydians, famous as archers, to Tubal and Greece, and to the distant islands that have not heard of my fame or seen my glory. They will proclaim my glory among the nations, and they will bring all your brothers from all the nations to my holy mountain in Jerusalem as an offering to Yahweh, on horses, in chariots and wagons, and on mules and camels, says Yahweh. They will bring them as the Israelites bring their grain offerings to the temple of Yahweh in ceremonially clean vessels." But here's where it's most important to understand. It's the next verse where we see it's Yahweh who establishes the priesthood he accepts. He'll establish the priesthood when Yeshua returns, and then we see verse 21 say, "And I will select some of them," meaning of the survivors, "also to be priests and Levites," says Yahweh. Thus, what I said regarding Isaiah 2 and Micah 4, the sacrificial system will be established again through the Torah, but it doesn't happen until Yeshua establishes it all. The system that will be set up in the end times will be a system set up by man and will not be accepted by Yahweh, as noted in verse 3. This system will be an abomination in the eyes of Yahweh. I strongly encourage you to watch our teaching titled The Assyrian. This teaching explains how there will come a time when the Jews will set up the sacrificial system, and then it will be overthrown by the Assyrian. That who many will say is the Antichrist, because he brings it all to an end by way of war. But then one will arise and conquer the Assyrian. He will rise as the Messiah to the Jews and reestablish the sacrificial system. Little will they know that is the true Antichrist, not the Christ. Thus, the Antichrist will deceive the world as the Messiah. Please watch that teaching. I sincerely believe you'll find it of value. Remember, the sacrificial system is coming again, but it will not be the one Yahweh accepts. Deception is coming, a powerful deception, and those who don't submit to that deception may get persecuted by that deception. Well, that's all I have. Think about it. Pray about it. But more than anything, be a doer of the word and not a hearer only. Until next time, Shalom.